The trophies tell you what they achieved. We tell you how they got there. Welcome to my channel. Imagine being told at 16 that you were not physically strong enough to make it at one of Spain's biggest football clubs. Imagine leaving the academy you had spent much of your childhood in, uncertain whether the dream you had built your life around was beginning to disappear. Now imagine that same boy, years later, standing beneath the lights in Istanbul, with the ball rolling towards him on the edge of the penalty area. One swing of his right foot, one goal, and Manchester City were champions of Europe for the first time. But that was only the beginning, because Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante would go on to become Premier League champion 4 times, a Champions League winner, European champion with Spain, Ballon d'Or winner, and eventually captain his country to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, where he was named the best player of the entire tournament. And somehow, one of the greatest midfielders of his generation became a global superstar, while behaving almost nothing like one. No obsession with building a social media empire, no carefully manufactured celebrity image. While other professional footballers were already living like stars, Rodri was attending university lectures, living among ordinary students, and completing a business degree.
For years, football watched the goal scorers, the dribblers, the superstars. Meanwhile, Rodri quietly controlled everything. And now, after 7 extraordinary seasons in Manchester, his story may be about to return to Spain, with Manchester City reportedly accepting a major offer from Barcelona. This is the story of the footballer who almost slipped through the system, then became the man who controlled the game. This is Rodri. Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante was born on 22 June 1996 in Madrid, Spain. Long before the Ballon d'Or, before Manchester City, and before packed stadiums knew him simply as Rodri, he was another football-obsessed child growing up in one of the world's great football cities. His early development took him through Rayo Majadahonda, before Atlético Madrid brought him into their youth system when he was around 11 years old. For a young footballer from Madrid, Atlético represented an enormous opportunity. And for years, Rodri developed inside their academy. But his path was not straightforward. At 16, Atlético let him go. Reports surrounding his departure have consistently described the concern as physical development. Rodri had the technical qualities and intelligence, but the academy reportedly questioned whether he possessed enough physical strength to succeed at the highest level. It is one of those decisions that looks almost impossible in hindsight. Today, Rodri stands around 6'3", roughly 1.9 meters, and is one of football's most physically commanding midfielders. But development does not happen at the same speed for every teenager.
Atlético made their decision, and Rodri had to make his. He could allow rejection to define him, or he could start again. Villarreal gave him that opportunity. In 2013, Rodri moved away from Atlético's academy and joined Villarreal's youth structure. The glamorous version of a football story usually jumps from rejection straight to triumph. Real development is much slower. Training, travel, youth matches, reserve football, studying, waiting, and slowly becoming better. That period would create the footballer the world later came to know.
Villarreal became much more than Rodri's second academy. It became the place where his career truly began. By 2015, he had progressed into Villarreal's reserve team. On 7 February 2015, still a teenager, Rodri made his senior first-team debut for Villarreal B. That same year brought another important milestone. Rodri represented Spain at the 2015 UEFA European Under-19 Championship in Greece. Spain won the tournament, and Rodri was not simply a passenger in that squad. UEFA records show he played almost every available minute of Spain's campaign. Before most football fans knew his name, He was already learning how to control midfield in a championship-winning Spanish team. Then came Villarreal's first team. Rodri made his senior first-team debut in December 2015 in the Copa del Rey. His first appearance in La Liga followed in April 2016, and gradually, the midfielder Atlético had released became increasingly difficult to ignore.
By the 2017-18 season, Rodri had become one of La Liga's standout young midfielders. Atlético Madrid later noted that during that league campaign, he recovered the ball 320 times, the highest total in La Liga, while completing 2,470 passes, the third highest figure in the competition. Those numbers explain what Rodri was becoming. He was not a midfielder whose influence depended on spectacular tricks. He controlled territory. He recovered possession. He offered himself constantly. He moved the ball, then moved again. And while his football career accelerated, something unusual was happening away from the pitch. Rodri was also studying. He enrolled at university in Castellón and pursued a degree in business administration. Professional football could easily have become his entire identity.
Rodri refused to let it. Training would finish, and he would turn his attention towards lectures and exams. Manchester City later confirmed that his studies continued during his final years in Spain and even through his first years after moving to England. Rodri himself would eventually call university one of the best periods of his life. There were hundreds of students in his residence, and somewhere among them was a young professional footballer who would eventually become the best player in the world. Not behaving like a superstar, just living, learning, and preparing.
By 2018, Atlético Madrid had seen enough. The club that had once allowed Rodri to leave now wanted him back. Atlético reached an agreement with Villarreal in May 2018, signing the 21-year-old midfielder on a 5-year contract. It was a remarkable full-circle moment. The boy who had left their academy returned as one of Spain's most promising midfielders. Atlético described him as a midfielder capable of winning possession, controlling offensive transitions, dominating positionally, and contributing in the air. And almost immediately, silverware arrived. Rodri was part of the Atlético side that won the 2018 UEFA Super Cup. He spent only one season back in Madrid, but that season confirmed that Villarreal's rising prospect could perform inside an elite Champions League club. Manchester City were watching. More importantly, Pep Guardiola was watching. City needed a long-term successor to Fernandinho, someone capable of standing in the center of Guardiola's positional system while processing the game faster than almost everybody around him. They believed Rodri was that player. On 4 July 2019, Manchester City signed Rodri from Atlético Madrid. He was 23. City paid approximately £62.8 million, at the time a club record transfer fee. The expectations were enormous. Playing defensive midfield for Pep Guardiola sounds simple when viewed from television. Receive the ball, pass the ball, protect the defense. In reality, it may be one of the most intellectually demanding positions in football. The player must understand where pressure is coming from before receiving possession. He must know where teammates are, where opponents are, which spaces cannot be abandoned, when to slow a match down, when to accelerate it. And one mistake in the center of the pitch can expose the entire team. Rodri had to learn. His first season was not perfect, but the important moments appeared quickly. In the 2020 League Cup final against Aston Villa, City were leading 1-0 when Rodri attacked a corner and headed home. City eventually won 2-1. A holding midfielder had already shown something that would become increasingly important throughout his career. Rodri had a habit of appearing when trophies were being decided. The following season, Manchester City regained the Premier League title and won another League Cup. Rodri was becoming increasingly central to Guardiola's football. City reached the 2021 Champions League final, but lost to Chelsea. For Rodri and City, Europe remained unfinished business.
Then came another unforgettable league moment. 22 May 2022, final day of the Premier League season. Manchester City needed victory against Aston Villa to guarantee the championship. With around 15 minutes remaining, they were losing 2-0. The title appeared to be slipping towards Liverpool. Ilkay Gundogan pulled one back. Then, Rodri arrived outside the penalty area. The pass came towards him. No panic. No unnecessary touch. He guided a low finish into the corner. 2-2. Moments later, Gundogan completed one of the most dramatic title-winning comebacks in Premier League history. City won 3-2. And once again, when the season reached the moment where everything could be won or lost, Rodri had scored.
But nothing compared with what happened 1 year later. The 2022-23 Manchester City team was chasing history. Premier League, FA Cup, Champions League. City won the league. They defeated Manchester United in the FA Cup final. Only Inter Milan stood between them and the treble. 10 June 2023, Istanbul, the Champions League final. Manchester City had spent years pursuing this trophy. Money had been spent. Managers had come and gone. Great players had tried. City had reached the final 2 years earlier and lost. Now, another chance had arrived. The match was tense. Inter were organized. City could not find the freedom they normally enjoyed. Then, in the second half, the ball reached Bernardo Silva near the byline. His cutback deflected into space. And standing near the edge of the penalty area was Rodri. Think about the pressure of that moment. Thousands of Manchester City supporters inside the stadium. Millions watching around the world. The Champions League. The treble. Club history. Rodri opened his body. Right foot into the net. Manchester City won, Inter Milan 0. The score never changed. When the final whistle sounded, Manchester City were European champions for the first time, and the winning goal belonged to Rodri. He was named Player of the Match in the final, and later UEFA Champions League Player of the Season for 2022-2023. For a player whose greatest qualities often happened far away from highlight reels, the defining image of Manchester City's greatest night belonged entirely to him. The celebration, the slide across the grass, the roar, the goal that completed the treble. Rodri was no longer merely one of the best defensive midfielders in football. He was becoming one of the most important footballers in the world. City's success continued. They won the 2023 UEFA Super Cup, then the 2023 FIFA Club World Cup, and Rodri's importance became even clearer through a remarkable unbeaten sequence. From February 2023 until May 2024, Manchester City's official records credit Rodri with going 74 consecutive club matches without defeat, spanning 475 days. For a midfielder, that number says something enormous. City could lose games without him. With him, for more than a year, they simply did not. The 2023-24 Premier League title race again went to the final day. City hosted West Ham knowing victory would secure an unprecedented achievement in English men's top-flight football. 4 consecutive league titles. Phil Foden scored twice. But when West Ham reduced the deficit and tension began to rise, who settled the game? Rodri. A controlled strike from outside the area. 3-1. Champions again. 4 Premier League titles in succession for Rodri and Manchester City. And by then, his game had developed beyond the traditional idea of a defensive midfielder. He recovered possession, he dictated tempo, he progressed attacks, he created chances, he scored important goals. And when opponents tried to counterattack, he often appeared exactly where City needed him. He did not need to be the fastest player. He often seemed to know what would happen before everybody else. That was his advantage: football intelligence. Rodri's international journey had begun long before his Manchester City dominance. He represented Spain at under 16, under 19, and under 21 level. His senior international debut arrived in March 2018 when he came on against Germany. Over time, he inherited responsibility in a position associated with some of the greatest midfielders Spain had ever produced: Sergio Busquets, Xabi Alonso, Xavi, Andres Iniesta. Those comparisons were inevitable, but Rodri gradually built his own identity. In 2023, Spain reached the UEFA Nations League final against Croatia. After a goalless match, Spain won on penalties. Rodri finished the tournament as the Nations League Finals Player of the Tournament. A year later came an even greater achievement: Euro 2024. Spain arrived with a young, exciting generation: Lamine Yamal, Nico Williams, Pedri, Dani Olmo. But at the center of everything was Rodri. Spain defeated Croatia, Italy, and Albania in the group stage, then Georgia, then Germany, then France, and finally England in Berlin. Spain won the European Championship. Rodri was named UEFA Euro 2024 Player of the Tournament. It was the perfect summary of his importance. The tournament contained younger stars, more explosive players, more spectacular dribblers. But the player controlling the structure underneath everything was Rodri. Then came the ultimate individual recognition. On 28 October 2024, Rodri won the Ballon d'Or. He finished ahead of Vinicius Jr., Jude Bellingham, and Dani Carvajal. For the first time, a Manchester City player had won football's most famous individual award. And Rodri became the first Spanish man since Luis Suarez in 1960 to lift it. For decades, awards like the Ballon d'Or had largely celebrated goal scorers and attacking superstars. Rodri's victory felt different. It represented recognition for control, positioning, decision-making, team structure, the thousands of actions that make winning possible even when they never become viral clips. The quiet midfielder had reached the summit of individual football. Yet by the time Rodri received the Ballon d'Or, he was walking through one of the hardest periods of his career. In September 2024, during Manchester City's Premier League match against Arsenal, Rodri suffered a serious anterior cruciate ligament injury. His season was effectively destroyed. Manchester City officially recorded only 8 appearances for him during the 2024-25 campaign. For almost 9 months, the man who controlled matches could only watch them. And City felt his absence. Rodri's recovery became a test not of tactical intelligence, but patience, rehabilitation, gym work, small movements, running, training, waiting. Then, in May 2025, during Manchester City's final home league match against Bournemouth, the stadium rose. Rodri came from the bench. Almost 9 months after the injury, he was a footballer again. The comeback was complete. The following season showed that Rodri could still influence decisive matches. Manchester City won the 2026 League Cup, defeating Arsenal 2-0 at Wembley. Then came the 2026 FA Cup final against Chelsea. City won 1-0. Rodri started, and before the winning goal arrived, he produced a crucial goal line clearance to deny Moises Caicedo. Again, the glamorous moment belonged to somebody else. Antoine Semenyo scored City's winner, but Rodri's intervention had helped keep the match alive. It was classic Rodri. Not every important action becomes the photograph on the front page. By July 2026, Manchester City's own statistical review recorded Rodri at 298 appearances, 265 starts, 28 goals, 30 assists, 544 tackles, and 22,918 minutes in a City shirt. Most importantly, City credited him with 13 trophies, 4 Premier League titles, 3 League Cups, 2 FA Cups, 1 Champions League, 1 UEFA Super Cup, 1 FIFA Club World Cup, and 1 Community Shield. 13 trophies in 7 seasons. And then Rodri completed the collection, the 2026 FIFA World Cup. This time, he was not simply an important member of Spain's midfield. He was the captain. Spain reached the final against Argentina. The match went beyond 90 minutes. Then Ferran Torres scored the only goal in extra time. Spain won 1-0. 16 years after their first men's World Cup title in 2010, Spain were champions of the world again, and Rodri lifted the trophy. His tournament was extraordinary. FIFA recorded 790 completed passes, breaking the record for the most completed passes by a player at a single World Cup, a record Rodri himself had previously held from 2022. In the final alone, he completed 101 of 105 passes. He played in all 8 of Spain's matches. Manchester City noted that he completed more passes, covered more distance, and registered more involvements than any other player at the tournament. When the awards were announced, there was little surprise. Rodri won the FIFA World Cup Golden Ball, the best player at the World Cup, European champion, world champion, Champions League winner, Ballon d'Or winner. The boy, once considered physically inadequate for Atlético Madrid's academy, had reached almost every summit football could offer.
And now his story has reached another extraordinary turning point. As of August 16, 2026, multiple major reports say Manchester City have accepted an offer from Barcelona for Rodri. Reuters reports the bid at approximately £65.4 million, with Rodri reportedly agreeing a 4-year contract. The Guardian also reports that City accepted a $65.4 million bid after previously rejecting lower Barcelona offers. Spanish reporting describes the financial structure slightly differently, with some reports placing the guaranteed fee around €60 million and the total package potentially reaching approximately €70 to €75 million through variables. So the precise structure differs between reports, but the central story is consistent. Rodri appears to be closing in on Barcelona. At the time of this documentary, however, neither Manchester City nor FC Barcelona has published the final official transfer announcement, meaning it should still be described as a reported imminent transfer, not yet a formally completed move. And if this really is the end of his Manchester City journey, the numbers describe an extraordinary legacy. 7 seasons, 298 appearances, 28 goals,
30 assists, 13 trophies, 4 Premier League titles, the winning goal in Manchester City's first Champions League final victory, the Treble, the Ballon d'Or, and a place among the greatest midfielders ever to wear sky blue. But perhaps numbers still do not completely explain Rodri, because his story was never really about numbers. It was about intelligence, patience, control, resilience. A teenager rejected by Atlético, a university student playing professional football, a midfielder operating outside the traditional spotlight, a player who did not need millions of followers to become impossible to ignore. And when football's greatest moments arrived, he was there. Wembley, the Etihad, Berlin, Istanbul, and finally, the World Cup final. Rodri rarely needed to shout for attention. His football did it for him.